Welcome to my channel. Before I make any reaction to this video, watch this video together with me. Please, as you watch, do not forget to like, share and subscribe, please.
There's a chapter in your book, I believe it's the longest one, called the Jonestown Death Tape. I probably should not have listened to this in the middle of the night before I was about to go to sleep because it was incredibly disturbing. But I will say that the thing that struck me the most about this is a transcript of a tape recording of Jim Jones addressing his congregation just before and during them taking the Flavor Aid, rather than Kool-Aid. Something that struck me is Jones is not ultra articulate. He is just speaking in half concocted thoughts and sentences and phrases, and there are elements there of him scaring people, like saying that there are armed gunmen that are just 20 minutes away or something like this. But I suppose I had always thought that Jim Jones must have put on this incredible, flawless performance of charisma in order to get people to not just drink Flavor Aid themselves that was poison, but also inject their own children with things like this. But that just wasn't true. He got up there and spoke and rambled, and the whole thing happened anyway.
Right, and he was on quite a lot of speed and other drugs at that point, and I mean, without kind of belittling the gravity of the situation, he sounds a little bit like, Droopy Dog or something like this, right? He can't speak properly because the muscles in his mouth are too relaxed. So I talked about how brainwashing doesn't really mean anything, and high control group is sort of this nebulous term. The word charisma is also a kind of nebulous, meaningless term, and yet sociologists still use it, right? In fact, some of the defenders of brainwashing have said, well, if you people can talk about charisma, why can't I talk about brainwashing? It's actually a fair point. So we're used to thinking of charisma, especially if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, of it's just a score. Some people have a lot of charisma and some people have a little of it, but it works in every situation. And we know from studies of charisma that is not how charisma actually works at all. So Barack Obama, very charismatic president. Donald Trump, very charismatic president. Half the country hates these two people.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not about a high charisma score. It's about a special relationship that a charismatic leader has with their followers. And one thing that happens in so-called cult violence is I think charismatic leaders are very aware of this. They say, if I make one false move, everybody will see I'm just some guy. I'm just some guy yelling about the Bible. I'm not actually a Messiah. I'm not actually a prophet or anything like this. And so certain leaders, and I would put David Koresh and Jim Jones in this category, will do literally anything to maintain their charisma, their charismatic authority, to keep the followers from seeing them as just an ordinary person. And I think the reason that Jonestown happened, that this massacre happened, is 20 members said that they wanted to go home with Leo Ryan's party. Congressman Leo Ryan came out to visit and was killed. 20 people out of 1,000 is not very many. But I think as far as Jim Jones was concerned, he said, well, it's 20 today, it's going to be 100 tomorrow. That's it, I've lost the community. And if I can't have this community, nobody will. So to your comments, I think what happened in Jonestown happened not because Jim Jones had this iron grip of mind control over his followers. It was actually quite the opposite. It was because his grip was very tenuous, and he knew that he could lose it at any moment.
Yeah, I suppose if he could actually control them, their every action, every thought, he could have just kept everybody alive. The fact that he did force people to go through this, a revolutionary suicide, he called it, was a symptom of his lack of control of them.
Right. I mean, even had nothing happened at Jonestown, the community was never sustainable.
Yeah.
They did not have enough able-bodied people to grow enough food to feed 1,000 people. They did not have enough money for this community to last. So it was going to end sometime soon. And the leaders knew this. And the leaders had already discussed, how are we going to end this on our own terms, where this doesn't all feel like a massive defeat. But yes, if he had mind control over his followers, when they said, I'm ready to leave, I want to go home with Leo Ryan, he could have just said, no, you don't want to leave. You like it here,
Right,
right?
right.
You want to stay here. It's because he doesn't have mind control that he can't do stuff like that, and he has to resort to tactics like killing a congressman or making everyone commit revolutionary suicide.
Okay, in your book, The Penguin Book of Cults, which I'll just say the only thing I didn't like about it is that it didn't have penguins in it. There were no penguins. That's the publisher. But in your book, you talk about this thing called media mania.
Alright, wonderful viewers. Here is our own reaction. The Jonestown tragedy. The Jonestown tragedy is one of the darkest moments in modern history. You and I can also attest to that. It is insane to think that Jim Jones, who was on speed and unable to speak properly, could convince over 900 people to follow him to their death. How? But you know what struck me in this topic? The sheer lack of control he actually had. He wasn't a mad control puppet master like many people assume. He was just a man afraid of losing his grip on his followers. This really speaks volume about human physiology and the power of manipulation. It also shows that the more you try to control people, the more it backfires. This is as simple as it is. It's not that his jaw are widened not to say the truth. This is just the plain of it. Let's still continue from the speakers to still hear them out on this particular video. Please do not forget, anywhere you can use to support me, just to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, please.
The only thing I didn't like about it is that it didn't have penguins in it. There were no penguins. That's the publisher. But in your book, you talk about this thing called media mania, and this was from the late 19th century, right? Can you kind of take me into that chapter of the book? What's media mania?
Sure. So for this book, a lot of the sources that we used had to be things that were in the public domain because of the way that Penguin Classics works. But one of the things I want to do is to show that long before this term brainwashing is coined in the 1950s, there was a long history of people medicalizing other people's religious choices and framing them not as a choice, but as some kind of contagion or illness. And so in the 19th century, there was a lot of new religions were emerging in the United States, things like Mormonism, the Church of Latter-day Saints, and spiritualism. Spiritualism was people holding seances and believing that they could talk to the dead. And this was a movement that in the 1800s was very closely tied with women's suffrage and other kind of progressive movements. And women had a lot of power to speak in spiritualist churches because it was believed that women were sort of naturally better mediums and better able to talk to the dead. So I found an article about this by a guy named Dr. Marvin, who was a professor of psychological medicine, and his take on why these women in the 1800s are not staying at home raising children and cooking dinner for their husbands and joining these weird new religions is because their womb has been tilted at a funny angle. And if your womb gets tilted at a funny angle, it could cause you to become interested in socialism. It could cause you to become interested in the Latter-day Saints. And he says, and for many women, this is causing them to become mediums. And he calls this mediumania. So he comes up with this kind of medicalized term for these experiences that women are having. And I think most people, if they read Dr. Marvin's treatise today, would say, well, this is kind of misogynistic dreck. This is not science. This is not medicine. But I would argue that we're still kind of making the same moves today with new cultural trends that we don't like and we want to medicalize.